He was a billionaire heading home from a long day when he heard a baby crying behind his building. She was wrapped in a torn sweater left in a trash can and barely breathing. He saved her life, then quietly disappeared from hers. But 15 years later, that same baby, now a brilliant young woman, walked into his office, carrying the only clue to her past. What happened next will break you and heal you. Welcome to Hearts and Billions, where the rich meet the broken, and one moment changes everything. Love, loss, redemption, all in one story. Subscribe to feel every heartbeat. Please kindly take me to 1,000 subscribers. It was close to midnight. Downtown lights still blinked above the city, but most offices had gone dark. The storm had arrived quietly, just enough rain to clear the streets, just enough wind to make people walk faster. Daniel Cross, founder and CEO of Cross Enterprises, stepped out of his glass tower into the night. He wasn't supposed to be there. The gala had ended hours ago. The champagne was still fresh on his breath, but he needed air. He needed silence. His life, filled with boardrooms and bright headlines, felt like a cage that day. He loosened his tie, walked past the luxury cars, and turned down a back alley beside the building. That's when he heard it. A sound so faint he almost mistook it for wind. Then he heard it again. A cry. Thin, weak, trembling. Daniel froze. He looked around. Nothing, just trash bins, broken bottles, a tipped-over umbrella. But the cry, it came again, more desperate now. He followed the sound, heart racing. His expensive shoes splashed through puddles. And then he saw it. A small cardboard box wedged between two dumpsters. A movement inside. He dropped to his knees, hands shaking. Inside the box was a baby, a newborn girl, wrapped in a torn sweater, her skin pale, lips trembling, tiny fingers curled into fists. She was crying softly, too weak to scream. Daniel's heart dropped. He didn't think. He didn't speak. He just moved. He took off his suit jacket and gently lifted her out of the box, wrapping her in the warm fabric. Her head fit in the crook of his arm like she had always belonged there. "It's okay. It's okay. I've got you," he whispered, voice cracking. He ran toward his car, yelling at the driver, "Hospital now!" The hospital room was quiet. Machines beeped softly. The rain still tapped gently against the windows. Inside the incubator, the newborn girl, Hope, slept peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling. Daniel stood just outside the glass, his arms crossed tightly, eyes fixed on her like he was afraid to blink. He had stayed all night. No calls, no meetings, no headlines, just her, the little girl he had pulled from a box behind a dumpster, the baby that had made him feel more human in 1 hour than all his billions ever had. The nurses said she was a fighter, cold, malnourished, barely hanging on. But she made it. She just needed someone. The nurse had said, someone to hear her. Daniel hadn't let go of that sentence since. But now the hard part had come. The social worker arrived that morning, a kind-faced woman in a beige coat, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Cross," she said gently, "thank you for what you did. Most people wouldn't have stopped. You saved her life." He nodded, still watching the sleeping infant. "We'll take it from here. Child Protective Services will place her in temporary foster care, and after that—" "Wait," he interrupted. "She has no family." The woman sighed. "No note, no name, no reports. Just left there like garbage." Daniel swallowed hard. He looked back at Hope. "Can I adopt her?" The woman raised her eyebrows. "Are you serious?" He nodded. I can give her everything. She paused. It's possible, but complicated. You'd need home visits, court approvals, parenting classes, background checks. You're a public figure. This would be all over the news. Daniel stepped back. His mind flashed with images of reporters, headlines, boardroom whispers, investors doubting his stability. Billionaire takes in alley baby. It wouldn't just be about her. They'd tear into it, into her, into him. He looked back at Hope, still sleeping, still peaceful. Then slowly, painfully, he shook his head. I don't want to make her life harder, he whispered. But I want to help. So he did what he could. He asked the hospital to name her Hope officially. He created a private fund to cover her care, her schooling, her health, all under a foundation name, so no one would trace it back to him. Every year he would check on the file. No interference, just quiet watching, making sure she was okay, growing safe. But that morning, before she was transferred, he walked into her room one last time. He placed a single finger inside her tiny palm. She gripped it tightly, and he whispered, You're going to be something incredible one day. I'll be watching, Hope, I promise. Then he turned and walked away. He'd never expected to see her again, not until 15 years later, when she walked into his office. Hope never knew where she came from. Not really. She grew up bouncing between foster homes, some kind, some cold, most forgettable. No mother to sing her lullabies, no father to tell her why she mattered. Just a name and a newspaper clipping she kept folded in her backpack like a piece of her own heartbeat. It read, Abandoned baby, found behind corporate tower, man saves her life. There was no photo, just a quote from a hospital nurse. If he hadn't come when he did, the baby wouldn't have made it. She read it 1,000 times. That man, who was he? Why had he saved her and then disappeared? She didn't hate him, but the questions lived in her bones. She struggled in school, not because she wasn't smart, but because she felt like a ghost. Other kids had parents cheering in the crowd. Hope had silence. So she started to build things. Out of Legos, cardboard, stolen sketch pads, tiny houses, safe places, dream spaces. When things got too hard, she'd draw. Homes she never lived in. Rooms full of light. Porches where no one got left behind. By 12, she was winning school art contests. By 14, her sketches were entered in national youth design showcases. People began to notice her hands, her mind, but no one noticed her heart. Except for one person, an anonymous donor listed on her scholarship award, the Cross Foundation. She never knew who it was, but it paid for her tutoring, her drawing tablet, her first summer design program. And every time she felt like giving up, she'd whisper, Someone out there believes in me, even if I don't know who they are. She kept the article in her bag, everywhere she went, because maybe one day she would find him, the man who pulled her out of the dark and gave her a name she was still trying to live up to. Hope was 15 when the letter arrived. It came in a plain white envelope with no return address. Just her name, slightly misspelled, and the foster home's mailbox number. She opened it on the front steps, fingers trembling, heart used to disappointment. But inside it wasn't rejection. It was an invitation. You have been awarded a full scholarship to attend the National Youth Design Institute. All materials, travel, and living expenses will be covered by a private donor through the Cross Foundation. She read it once, then again. The words didn't make sense until she saw the name, Cross. Her breath caught. Cross Foundation. Same name as the company on the building where she was found. Same name in the article she carried with her since she was a child. Could it be him? The man who found her? Who saved her? Hope didn't know, but something in her chest whispered, It is. That summer, Hope went to the city for the first time. A train ticket, a welcome package, a dorm room with her name on it. And for the first time in her life, she felt chosen. The campus was bright and buzzing with ideas. Students twice her age, professors with awards on their shelves. And there she was, just a foster kid with a newspaper clipping and a head full of sketches. But her work, it stunned them. Her first assignment, redesign a shelter for abandoned youth. She drew curves, skylights, quiet rooms, and open hands. Who taught you to think like this? One teacher asked. She shrugged. No one, I just know how it feels. Every day she got stronger, smarter, more focused. But every night she stared at the city skyline from her dorm window and wondered, is he watching me? Does he know what he started? Because if it was him, if the man who found her in the trash still remembered her, then maybe, just maybe, one day she'd find her way back to him. The day Hope walked into Cross Enterprises, the sky was perfectly clear, but her stomach felt like a storm was brewing. She stood outside the building for 10 full minutes, staring up at the sleek glass tower that seemed to pierce the clouds. The same tower from the newspaper clipping, the place where her story had started, even if no one inside remembered her. Now at 21 years old, she was here on her own terms. She straightened her thrifted blazer, wiped her clammy hands on her skirt, and walked through the golden doors. The lobby was cold, polished, quiet. She felt small immediately. The receptionist smiled politely as Hope approached the desk. I'm here for the architecture internship interview. Hope West. The receptionist scanned the list, then nodded. You're early. Mr. Cross himself will be conducting final interviews today. Take the elevator to the 42nd floor. There's a waiting room. Hope's heart stopped for a second. Mr. Cross himself. The name hit her like a wave. She had told herself this internship was just a step in her career. But now, standing in the same building where she was left as a baby, she couldn't pretend anymore. She was searching, and something inside her told her she was close. The elevator ride felt endless. She stared at her reflection in the polished metal doors, adjusting her collar, brushing away stray curls. You belong here, she whispered to herself, a voice she rarely believed, but said anyway. The waiting room was silent. 3 other candidates sat with stiff shoulders and designer briefcases. Hope sat apart, her backpack at her feet, one hand gripping her folder, the other resting on the strap of her bag. Inside that bag, tucked between her resume and sketchbook, was the newspaper clipping. She always brought it with her, not because she expected anything, but because she couldn't let go of that one moment in her story. The door finally opened. A tall man in a dark suit stepped out. His presence filled the room before he said a word. His hair was streaked with gray now, his jawline sharper. But when Hope looked up, she knew. She didn't have proof, didn't remember his face, but something in her bones told her it was him, the man who had pulled her out of a box. The man who gave her a name. He looked around at the candidates, his eyes scanning the room, then pausing briefly on her. Something flickered in his expression. A hesitation, a spark of familiarity he didn't yet understand. Hope West, he called. She stood slowly. Yes, sir. As she walked toward him, her heart thundered. She didn't know what she'd say. She didn't even know if she was ready to learn the truth. But this time, she wasn't the girl in the box. She was the woman walking. Back in Daniel Cross had interviewed hundreds of interns in his career. Most came in polished, rehearsed, forgettable. But this one, Hope West, was different the second she stepped into his office. She had eyes that didn't just observe, they remembered. A quiet stillness that didn't come from shyness, but from years of navigating the world with no safety net. Daniel extended his hand, his voice smooth as always. "Nice to meet you, Hope." She shook it gently. Her palm was cold, but her grip steady. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Cross." She sat in the leather chair across from him. He noticed the worn edges of her portfolio, the faint ink stain on her shirt cuff. Not unprofessional, just real. Like someone who had gotten to this room the hard way. He asked the usual questions at first. Where she studied, why she chose architecture, what her design philosophy was. Her answers were intelligent, clear, but understated. "I don't want to build things just to impress," she said softly. "I want to build spaces that make people feel safe, like they can breathe again." Daniel blinked. That voice, that why, it hit something inside him he didn't expect. It sounded like someone he once knew. Then she opened her portfolio. Page after page of sketches, floor plans, and 3D renderings. Shelters shaped like open hands. Community centers with skylights and murals. Tiny homes wrapped in trees. Not just structures, but stories. Daniel leaned in. "These aren't standard projects," he said. "Where do you get your ideas?" Hope hesitated. Then quietly, "I grew up in foster care. I know what it feels like to be in a space that isn't yours. So I tried to draw places that feel like someone finally said, 'You matter here.'" His breath caught. For a moment, he forgot the polished walls, the desk, the city outside. All he saw was a flash of memory. A rainy night, a cardboard box, a newborn wrapped in a torn sweater. Hope continued speaking, unaware. But Daniel's mind was racing. West, he thought. That wasn't her name before. It was the agency's name. Westview Services. He remembered. He remembered everything. His gaze dropped, and he noticed the edge of something folded in the side pocket of her bag. Old yellowed paper. And on it, a headline he hadn't seen in 15 years. "Abandoned baby found behind Cross Enterprises." Time stopped. He looked up slowly. Hope was watching him now, quietly, noticing the change in his face. "I've carried that article since I was a child," she said softly. "I don't know who he was, the man who found me, but I'm here because he did." Daniel's chest tightened. She didn't know. She didn't know it was him. And for the first time in his adult life, he didn't know what to say. He cleared his throat. "You've done something remarkable, Hope, with everything you've been through." She smiled faintly. "It's what he would have wanted me to do, I think." Whoever he was, Daniel nodded, swallowing hard. "You're exactly the kind of person this company needs." And he meant it, not just professionally, but personally. She stood to leave, still unaware of the storm unraveling inside him. He watched her walk out of his office, and the moment the door closed, Daniel leaned back in his chair, pressed a trembling hand to his face, and whispered, "Hope, I found you." The meeting was over. Hope stepped into the hallway, her heart still racing, not from nerves, but from something else, a feeling she couldn't name. The man behind that desk, his eyes, the pause in his voice, the way he looked at her when she mentioned the article. It was like, for a split second, he saw her before she even introduced herself. She took a seat in the empty reception area, waiting for the elevator, her mind swirling. Her bag rested in her lap. Her fingers absent-mindedly tugged at the side zipper, where the old folded newspaper clipping sat, creased, fragile, familiar. She hadn't shown it to anyone in years, not because she didn't want to, but because no one had ever asked. Not until today. Behind the office door, Daniel Cross stood frozen, one hand still resting on the arm of his chair, the other pressed to his chest. He was no longer in a skyscraper. He was in a rain-soaked alley. A crying baby, a whisper of a name, Hope. And now that baby was back in his office. Alive, thriving, beautiful, brilliant. She had become everything he once hoped for. and everything he had feared he'd never see. He opened the drawer in his desk. Inside, a leather-bound notebook, one he had kept hidden for years. In it, he had written her milestones. Not officially, not as a father, but as a man who couldn't forget. Age 3, enrolled in preschool in Westview County. Age 7, reading level above grade. Age 12, won regional. Drawing contest, note. Design featured a safe house. Age 15, accepted into NYDI via Cross Foundation. Age 21, internship application. Accepted. He had tracked her life from the shadows. Now she was here, so close he could reach out and tell her everything. But he didn't, not yet, because he wasn't sure if she'd want to know. Just then, outside the office, Hope stood quickly. Her bag slipped off her lap, hitting the floor with a soft thud. Papers spilled, resumes, sketches, and then the article. It fluttered onto the tile, landing at the receptionist's feet. Daniel opened the door at the exact moment it happened. He saw it. The headline, the year, the memory in black and white. His heart stopped. Hope bent to pick it up. Their eyes met. She held it close to her chest, embarrassment flashing across her face. "It's silly, I know," she said quietly. I don't know where I came from. And this is the only thing that's ever felt like a clue." Daniel's throat tightened. He stepped forward slowly. "It's not silly," he said gently. She looked at him, curious. "Do you know who found her?" she asked. There it was. The moment he could say it. Right now, 3 words. It was me. But he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he smiled softly and said, "Maybe you're closer to the truth than you think." Hope tilted her head, confused, then nodded politely and stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, and Daniel stood there. The article still fresh in his mind. His past had just walked into his future. That night, Daniel Cross didn't go home. He sat in his office long. After the last light on the 42nd floor had gone dark, city lights shimmered through the floor-to-ceiling windows. But he didn't see them. He sat with his elbows on the desk, his head in his hands. Hope, her voice, her face, her story, everything he had buried, was now standing in front of him again. Older, braver, more beautiful than he ever imagined. For 15 years, he had carried the weight of walking away. He had told himself it was better for her, that the cameras would have destroyed her privacy, that the board would have never accepted it, that he wasn't ready to be a father. But now she was here, not asking for anything, just unknowingly looking for the truth. And it shattered him. He stood abruptly and opened his private cabinet. Inside was a locked box, the one he hadn't opened in a decade. He pulled it out, hands trembling slightly. Inside were 5 things. A hospital wristband labeled baby girl, unnamed. A tiny torn sweater, the one she'd been wrapped in. The original newspaper clipping. A silver chain with the word hope engraved. He had it made but never gave it. And a photo, grainy. His driver had taken it the night it happened. A man in a black coat, holding a bundle close to his chest. Rain pouring, eyes filled with something between panic and purpose. Him. Daniel sank into the couch, the photo in his lap. He had never stopped thinking about her. Every year, every decision, she had been in the background of his mind. Even his company's core programs, the shelter funding, the Design Innovation Fund, the Cross Foundation's youth scholarships, all born from her, from Hope. He picked up the phone and dialed a private number. A lawyer answered. "Mr. Cross, I need a copy of an adoption case file," Daniel said, his voice tight. 15 years ago, a child abandoned behind my building. Name was Hope. She went into the system under Westview Services. There was a pause. "You're listed on that file, sir." As the anonymous emergency guardian, Daniel's breath caught. Was she ever adopted? No, sir. She remained in foster care until her teens. The Cross Foundation supported her under a different name, at your request. Daniel clenched his jaw. He had kept her close, without ever giving her what she really needed, the truth. He looked at the photo again, at the baby he held once under a thunderstorm. And now she had walked back into his life, carrying the very article he once hoped she'd never find. But she had found it. She had followed the clues, and she was standing at the edge of everything she never knew. He picked up the silver necklace from the box, the one he never gave her. The word hope shimmered under the office light, and he whispered, barely breathing, "I owe you more than silence. I owe you the truth." The next morning, the city was bright and clear. But inside Daniel Cross's office, the air felt heavier than ever before. He stood by the window, holding the silver necklace in one hand and the photograph in the other. On his desk sat a fresh cup of coffee, untouched. Every part of him was pacing on the inside. 15 years of silence had wrapped themselves around his throat. But today, he was done hiding. He called his assistant. "Please ask Hope West to come in again, today, now." Downstairs, Hope had just finished her onboarding paperwork. She was officially accepted as one of the 3 design interns, but her mind was still on the interview, on Mr. Cross's strange pauses, his expression when he saw the newspaper clipping. She hadn't let it go, and when the receptionist leaned over and said, "Mr. Cross has asked to see you privately," her heart nearly stopped. She walked into his office slowly. This time she wasn't nervous, just ready. Daniel stood when she entered, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then he nodded to the chair across from him. "Please, sit." She did. Her backpack rested beside her again, article still folded inside. He walked around to the front of the desk instead of sitting behind it. And then he spoke. "I haven't been honest with you." Hope blinked. "About what?" Daniel took a slow breath, then held out a photograph, a grainy image, a man in a black coat, holding a baby wrapped in a torn sweater. Hope's eyes narrowed as she studied it. "This is the night I was found." He nodded. "Yes." She looked up at him. "Why do you have this?" Then he held out the necklace, a small silver chain. On it, the name Hope. Her mouth parted slightly. Her voice was no more than a whisper. "Mr. Cross, what is this?" And then he told her everything. How he had heard her cries that night. How he carried her in the rain. How he named her, funded her, followed her growth from a distance. How he almost adopted her, but let fear win. By the end, Hope sat perfectly still. Tears brimmed in her eyes, but she didn't blink. "Why now?" she asked softly. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Daniel knelt beside her chair, not like a CEO, like a man begging to be forgiven. "Because I didn't think I was enough. Because I thought silence would protect you, but now I see that all it did was keep you wondering." He looked up at her. "And you deserve more than wondering, Hope. You deserve the truth. You always did." Hope stared at the photo in her lap. Her whole world shifted in a single conversation. She had imagined this man for so long, imagined him as a stranger, a ghost, a shadow she'd never meet. And now he was real, broken, honest, regretful, and still holding out the necklace. "I don't know if you want this," he said, "but it's yours if you do." She reached for it with shaking hands, and for a long time neither of them said a word. Until finally, Hope whispered, "Thank you for not walking away that night." "He," replied, voice cracking, "I almost did. But you cried just loud enough." Weeks passed. Not much changed on the surface. Hope still came into the office each morning with her backpack and her sketches. Daniel still ran his company with precision and grace, but something beneath the surface had shifted. They didn't call it what it was. Not at first. No dad, no daughter, just careful conversations, small lunches, quiet walks. Two people learning how to exist in each other's lives. After fate had already written their story, one Thursday afternoon, Hope knocked on Daniel's office door. She walked in, holding a rolled-up design in her arms. "It's my final intern project," she said softly. "I wanted you to see it first." Daniel cleared a space on the long table. She gently unrolled the drawing. It was a women's and children's shelter, but not just any shelter. There were curves in the walls, soft rounded rooms, wide windows with stargazing benches, a rooftop garden shaped like a child's hand, and near the front entrance, a plaque drawn into the design. The D for the ones who cried softly and the ones who chose to listen. Daniel stared at it for a long time. "This," he said, voice low, "this is more than a building." Hope nodded. "It's what I wish had existed when I was a child. A place to be found. A place to start again." She paused, then looked directly at him. "I want to build it for real, with your help." Daniel didn't hesitate. "We'll fund it together." He picked up a pen and signed his name to the corner of the drawing, right next to hers. Months later, shovels hit the ground. Hope stood in a white hard hat, looking out over the foundation of what would become the Haven Project. Her design brought to life. Volunteers hammered, bulldozers rumbled, but she stood still, taking it all in. Daniel walked up beside her. He handed her a small box. Inside, a nameplate. Designed by Hope West. Inspired by the night everything began. They didn't say much, but then Hope turned to him, eyes soft. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't gone down that alley?" Daniel looked out over the field. "I do, and it scares me." She smiled. "Well, I'm glad you did." That night, as stars began to shine above the construction site, Hope slipped on the necklace he once saved for her. It read Hope, and for the first time in her life, she believed in it too.